Welcome to this Tutor to You Paper 3 walkthrough for AQA A Level Sociology. In this video we're going to focus on how to answer the 10-mark and apply and analyse question on crime. Now the 10-mark apply and analyse questions appear on both Paper 1 and Paper 3, and they're either focused on education on Paper 1 or crime on Paper 3. In order to answer this question, you need to have two extended paragraphs that must draw on information from the item presented. And it's really useful to signpost where you're using the item by putting item A in brackets or in quotation marks. This question requires students to analyse and or evaluate the explanation that is offered. On the mark scheme, it suggests that you can analyse and or evaluate, which means you can get into the 8 to 10 level without evaluating. Likewise, putting some evaluation in will not be penalised in any way and will be rewarded. This is different from some of the other questions, for example, the outline and explain question on Paper 1 and Paper 3, where evaluation is not credited. So you can evaluate on this question. However, if you show thorough analysis, that is still going to be enough to get you into the 8 to 10 band. Now the layout of this question has changed over the last few years, but it still presents you with an item. There will be an item and 3 sentences roughly within that item. We've laid it out like this. Item A. Sociologists have suggested that ethnic minority groups are disadvantaged by the structure of the criminal justice system. Others have suggested that it is the attitudes of individuals within the criminal justice system that leads to false levels of ethnic minority offending. Sociologists argue that the criminal justice system distorts rates of offending by ethnicity. And our question, applying material from item A, analyse 2 ways that the criminal justice system can distort rates of offending by ethnicity. Now you may notice that the third line, the second paragraph in the item, is the same as the question. And this is worth noting, because if you try to draw your item hook from that third line, you're not going to be credited with it being a valid hook. The hooks are usually in the first paragraph. So what we need to do is to identify 2 hooks or hints at what we might discuss in our answer of this question. In this item, we've highlighted structure of the criminal justice system and attitudes of individuals within the criminal justice system as 2 ways in which we might develop our response. What we need to do now is we need to apply some sociological concepts and potentially some research findings to those 2 hooks. What we do here is we do what's called a hook, line and thinker activity. So we will take the hook, we will try to apply it to a sociological concept, and we will try to come up with a piece of research, the thinker. Now it's important to note that if you get the thinker wrong, or if you cannot come up with a specific piece of research, you're not going to be penalised. The ability to demonstrate this knowledge is really useful. However, the sociological concept that you're discussing is far more important than the researcher who has conducted it. So let's have a look at our hook, line and thinkers. So our first hook we looked at as being the structure of the criminal justice system, and we've linked this into institutional racism. We'll show you how this link is made in a moment. Few people have discussed the concept of institutional racism. Most notable ones were the Macpherson report in the aftermath of the murder of Stephen Lawrence, the Scarman report, which was released following the riots in the early 1980s, and the Lamy Review, which is a more recent piece of research that looks at ways in which the prison service, that looks at ways in which the criminal justice system overrepresents ethnic minority groups. Our second hook, we've gone with the attitudes of individuals within the criminal justice system, and we've concentrated on canteen culture. And this was from a study by Waddington. There's also Reiner also did a study on this. And now we need to develop how might institutional racism distort rates of offending, and how might a canteen culture distort rates of offending. So what we need to do is we need to link the cause to the effect. So we start out here with institutional racism. Institutional racism is policies and practices that disadvantage minorities. This means that there is a lack of representation of minorities in the criminal justice system, and therefore ethnic minority groups are more likely to be treated harshly within the criminal justice system. Our second development of a hook is we have canteen culture, and this is the preconceived ideas about minority groups that some members of the police may have as a result of the canteen culture that they develop within the police. This might mean that ethnic minorities are more likely to be targeted for stop and search, and this leads to higher rates of offending because of the selective law enforcement. They are more likely to be targeted and therefore more likely to be found in possession of weapons or drugs. Now we need to develop those into paragraphs. So if we look at our sample response, we started out quite simply with one way that the criminal justice system can distort rates of offending by ethnicity is through institutional racism. So we're highlighting our way straight away. We're going to put in a link to the item. Institutional racism refers to the ways in which the structure of the criminal justice system, in quotation marks, and item A in brackets behind it, puts minority groups at a disadvantage through its policies and procedures. Now we're going to apply a little bit of evidence. Reports such as the Macpherson report and the Scarman report have highlighted how the criminal justice system has operating practices that place minorities at a disadvantage. Now we need to link it in to how does this impact on ethnic minority offending and the distortion of rates of offending. For example, only 9% of judges and magistrates in England and Wales are from minority ethnic groups, so we're developing our analysis through a little bit more research. Despite being 19% of the total population, this places some minority ethnic groups such as Black Caribbeans at a disadvantage, as they are more likely to be treated harshly by the criminal justice system. So they're more likely to be treated harshly. That is our distortion. And we've backed this up. I mean, we can see this as being an evaluation because what we're doing is we're supporting the point. Evidence for this comes from the Lamy Review that found that minority ethnic groups are overrepresented at all stages of offender and young offender statistics. What we've done is we've shown how institutional racism, we've got evidence of institutional racism in there. We've put further evidence of how ethnic minority groups are disadvantaged because of this, and then we've backed it up with some statistics. Now you may note that we've not put specific statistics, but what we've done is we've talked about them being overrepresented at all stages of offender and young offender statistics, and examiners will be aware that this is the case. Our second response, a second way that the criminal justice system can be found to distort levels of offending by minority ethnic group is through having a canteen culture. Again, we're not specifically referencing the item just yet. Now we're going to bring in a bit of research that does do that. Waddington found that individuals within the criminal justice system, item A, e.g. the police, had a distinct culture of suspicion of minority ethnic groups and preconceived ideas of their criminality. But how does this lead to a distortion of criminal statistics? As a result, this may lead to selective policing of areas. Selective policing is a nice sociological term, with higher levels of ethnic diversity, or the implementation of stop and search policies on minority groups. For example, the rate of stop and search for Black Caribbeans is 7 times higher than that of white British persons. As a result, they are more likely to be arrested and charged with offences if found in possession of drugs or weapons. So this is our distortion. And what we've done is we've explained how this works. With this one here, we can see there's a lot more analysis. We've talked about the process rather than focusing on supporting evidence. Bit of exam gold: when you're referring to minority ethnic groups, try and be specific. Not all ethnic minority groups are overrepresented in crime statistics. In fact, many are underrepresented, particularly those from Chinese and Indian ethnic backgrounds. This goes the same for education. Ethnic minority groups are not a homogeneous group. If you focus on the experiences of a specific ethnic minority group, it shows better knowledge and understanding of society as a whole, and will move you into the higher grade levels. That concludes this Tutor to You AQA A Level Sociology Paper 3 walkthrough, looking at the 10-mark apply and analyse questions for crime. Thanks for watching.